to Health and Home Learning Community webinar. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be starting the presentation right after I go through a few slides with some ground rules and an overview of the presentation today. I'm Ron Spingarn. I'm Project Director at Transform Health, which is the consulting firm that manages the the Pathways to Health and Home project for the city. And if you do need any technical support, please use the chat feature on your right-hand side of the screen. And we will be recording the webinar today. Today's topic is the basics of Medicare, SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, Eligibility, and Medi-Cal. It is the second part of a webinar that our speaker today, John Tan, did for us last month. And today's presentation will be getting into more detail about case studies, and we will also be answering your questions throughout the webinar. So please enter them in the chat box if you have any questions. And if you are sharing your laptop with someone else, please enter your email address when you ask us questions in case we need to get back to you after the webinar is over. So as I said, this is the part 2 of our Medicare, SSI, and Medi-Cal series. Pathways program continues to serve people living with disabilities and an aging population that needs assistance, managing what can be challenging application and enrollment processes so that they can receive a wide range of benefits that they're eligible for, including health coverage. Given the complexities of the Medicare program and its intersections with SSI and Medi-Cal, Pathways service partners play a critical role in ensuring that our program enrollees do not suffer from lapses in benefits, which can lead to gaps in getting services they need. SSI is critically important for eligible persons with lower incomes to access certain benefits and health coverage options, especially persons experiencing homelessness, older adults, and those with disabilities. SSI can help our clients access a source of rental income to support their housing needs, particularly persons who don't meet eligibility criteria for or can't access the permanent supportive housing program. The SSI application process can be very time-consuming and confusing, especially for people who are experiencing homelessness. Studies have shown that homeless disability claimants are denied benefits at significantly higher rates than other persons, often due to their failure to navigate the cumbersome application process, not because of any medical impairments. For those of you who were with us on the last webinar with John, we focused on SSI, Medicare Basics, and Medi-Cal and how they relate to each other for our clients. Today we're going to get into more examples and case studies and focusing on advocacy for both programs to continue the work we started last time so the City of Sacramento can help build capacity throughout the Pathways to Health and Home provider community and support our clients' long-term housing stability and wellness. Now for a few ground rules. We ask that each attendee use their own computer so we can count everyone who has participated today and reply to any questions that you have in the chat box. So please, again, give us your email address if you have questions in the chat box. We really want to hear from you throughout the presentation, so please do ask questions on the sidebar, but please do not share any personally identifiable information, PII, or personal health information, PHI, about clients in the chat box. Lastly, again, this event is being recorded so that you can share it with others afterwards, and it will be available shortly after today's webinar via a YouTube link we will send out to those of you who registered. Or if you've not registered and are sharing a computer, please send us an email at pathways@transformhc for healthcare.com. That's pathways@transformhc.com. So our speaker today works for an organization. Our speaker today works for an organization that you probably know about. And if you don't, we do encourage you to check them out. The HICAP program, the Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy program, is funded by federal and state dollars and provides free, confidential, one-on-one counseling, education, and assistance to individuals and their families about Medicare, long-term care insurance, and other health insurance related to issues and planning for long-term care needs. It also provides legal assistance and legal referrals to help people dealing with Medicare or long-term care insurance-related issues. HICAP counselors are trained to help Medicare beneficiaries understand the complex insurance options available in our region. And if you want to contact them for more information, they conduct community presentations and outreach to community organizations and beneficiaries. So our speaker today is John Tan. I'm excited to introduce those of you who haven't participated before to John. He is from the Greater Sacramento Region HICAP program, where he is a program manager and managing attorney with Legal Services of Northern California. Their program serves Sacramento County and 8 other counties. He's been with LSNC for 9 years and began working as a staff attorney for the Senior Legal Hotline, working on grandparents' rights and mediation issues. And more recently, he worked with LSNC's Health Rights Unit, working with healthcare consumers in 32 counties on a wide range of consumer issues. Before going to law school, John earned a Master's in Public Health degree from UCLA in Community Health Sciences and a Master of Arts in Asian American Studies. So thank you for being with us, John, and I will turn you over the slides and the reins now.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me again. And this is sort of a continuation of the previous session, focusing more on the questions that came up on, so what can I do to help a person who may qualify for these programs, specifically for the income support programs based on disability and age. You'll get materials distributed through the links that make it a little easier to screen folks for these programs, to remind yourselves of the things that came up last time, and things that you can use going forward to help your work to screen folks for it. Now, as an attorney at Legal Services, we're all taught to be generalists. So we have basic understanding and knowledge of the programs that affect the folks that come to see us, but we also specialize in things. So I specialize in healthcare, but I have basic understanding and work with SSI and SSDI related advocacy. So I'm hoping to infuse this presentation, as dry as it will be, and I'm giving you the hint because I know I'm boring, that I'm trying to give you some information that'll help you recognize this potential issue for a client, how you can help that person go in and advocate for these benefits, and also when you might want to call for help and hook your clients up with an advocate who could take it further as needed. So I just want to give you the caveat that I'm not an expert in disability benefits, but I know enough to be dangerous and to hopefully make you good enough to recognize that you can help your clients as well. So a little bit more about our organization. As Ron mentioned, we're the Legal Services, and HICAP is part of Legal Services. We're the civil legal aid for 23 Northern California counties, including Sacramento. Our HICAP serves the 9 counties in the Greater Sacramento region. And the mission of Legal Services of Northern California is to provide quality legal services that empower the poor to identify and defeat the causes and effects of poverty. So we're really looking at upstream root causes of problems that our clients face, and then try to take those stories and eliminate those causes. And in our healthcare work, we try to empower consumers to understand and exercise the healthcare rights that they have in the system that we currently have. So again, the goal is similar to the last presentation: to increase your awareness of the various Social Security disability related programs, Medicare savings programs, and Medi-Cal programs to help especially our low income, homeless, elderly populations that may benefit from just a little bit of help here and there. Want to help familiarize you all as the participants with some of the basic program eligibility and identify some of the things, the areas of difficulty in these programs and how to assist applicants with dealing with those programs. And then finally, when you would want to refer to an organization such as Legal Services or any of the other advocacy organizations that help individuals who are trying to get benefits. So first poll question. Oops. Going back to the poll question. All right, so how many clients have you helped apply for Social Security benefits, either income, disability, or retirement? And this is just to get a sense of what people are currently doing. All right, just a few more seconds and we'll move on. Okay. Okay, so it looks like the majority of folks are, or the vast majority of folks is less than 10, with most people saying only once. Great, so, and then for one person, more than 20 times. So hopefully that person will be able to share some stories as well. Alrighty, so let's go on. So let's start with the disability related programs. So as we talked about last time, there are a couple of different programs involved when I say disability. And there's also a whole vocabulary about it. Any of these programs that are out of Social Security, out of these regulations, loves their jargon. So you'll hear all these different things. I will try not to overly use the jargon, but just be aware that this jargon exists in all these bureaucratic forms. And I will talk a little bit about some of them as they are relevant to this discussion of how do I help someone navigate the system and get the benefits that they need. Please feel free to call me on it if I use something that you don't understand and don't bother, and if I don't bother to explain it, because again, as someone who generalizes in a lot of stuff and talks about it a lot, it becomes I take it for granted that I know that people know what these things mean. So if you're looking for the rules, there's a hierarchy of how Social Security works. And this is basically how I, as an advocate, would go about trying to challenge someone's determination or challenge a rule that I feel is unfair or doesn't work. So starting with due process through Constitution, cases that people have brought to litigation, the laws that are written up, and then the way Social Security has interpreted those rules through regulations. It goes all the way down to how each program is run through the Program Operations Manual System, or the POMS. And then depending on going to hearing, then there's this law manual, HALEX. These are all available online. So if you have a good grasp of Google, you can find these and relatively easily. I will use a lot of these when I try to pursue a disability case to make sure that I'm giving the judges or decision makers all the tools that they will need to find in favor of my client. So another poll question. All right. At the federal level, CMS, or the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, handles the financing of and enrollment into Social Security programs, whereas Social Security Administration handles the regulatory aspects of these programs. True or false? Alrighty. So we're going to stop right there. Most people feel that this is true, and it is false. CMS has nothing to do with Social Security programs, but Social Security actually handles enrollment and financing of the Medicare program. So that's, again, there are all these different bureaucracies that work with each other or don't work with each other, that interact with each other, and that cause a lot of problems for our client bases, because it causes the confusion that sends them from one place to another, and sends them through this endless loop of calling this agency and calling that agency and calling this agency and calling that agency and not being able to get an answer. So in this case, the answer, this is false. Alrighty. Okay. So when we're talking about Social Security Act, which is the act of Congress that enacted, among other things, Social Security programs, we're talking about a whole bunch of different programs that, and I'm trying to limit it to the ones that are that we'll talk about for our client base. But basically, Social Security Disability, SSI or Supplemental Security Income, the retirement program that we know as Social Security, and then also other programs like Medicare and extra help for prescription drug costs. Those are all part of the Social Security Act in different places. So what you need to know to help your clients is basically figuring out what programs are they on, if they're already on it, or what are they eligible for. So this is a screenshot. This is basically the letter that someone gets from a Social Security office. And if you don't know what benefit they get, you can look at this letter and it'll tell you what they look at. You're looking at what the headline is, and also any sort of letters that come after the claim number. So look at that upper left corner, and you can generally tell which benefit they are based on those two letters. And I've referred to the POMS. Again, this is the Program Operation Manual that's available online, which will describe what those two letters actually mean and which program that corresponds to. The other things that I tend to ask a client about is how much is their benefit? Because if they're on SSI, then it's not going to be more than $1,000 unless they're blind. There's a different level of benefits based on what kind of disability you have. If they've got more than $1,000 and they're not blind, more likely than not, they have SSDI, or they're on retirement if they're over the age of 62, 65-ish. You also could ask when they received their benefits. In this era of direct deposit, this is less of a relevant question, but when people receive paper checks for SSI were received at a different time than paper checks for SSDI or retirement. Okay. All right, question. So this is a break for questions. So one of the questions is, what is the POMS? The POMS is the Program Operation Manual. That is basically how Social Security interprets certain rules. So where the law and where the regulations have holes in it, this is where the agency determines how they're going to operate, and what this rule is versus what that rule is. So that's where a lot of the technical nitty-gritty lines and which form is used for what, and what are these abbreviations, and what does a Social Security worker do in this process. Question of what is CI? Trying to remember the context in which CI came up. Is that the abbreviation in the after someone's Social Security number on a letter? Then another question was about distinguishing features between SSA and CMS. So Social Security Administration, the SSA deals with basically the Social Security program, the income support, and a lot of the determination. They, on the Medicare side, will deal with eligibility. So I want to sign up for Part A and Part B, and here's how much your premium is. So they will deal with that portion of Medicare, versus CMS is the portion that deals with what does Medicare cover? What Medicare plans are available? What does the Medicare program look like? That's what CMS tends to do. They also run the Medicaid program. So our Medi-Cal program, the state reports to CMS for Medi-Cal. And how do I advocate to SSA versus CMS? So if you are representing a person, and we'll talk about forms later on, but there is a specific form that you can use to become an authorized rep. So an appointment of representative form. That is what you would use in order to advocate on behalf of someone at Social Security, so that you wouldn't necessarily need that client with you. Although with the client, you can always bring, you can always have the client with you on the phone to access the records, to try to ask questions of Social Security about them. Similar with Medicare, with CMS, there are authorization forms that can be used so that you can talk on a client's behalf when it comes to contacting and communicating with Medicare. Okay, so feel free to ask questions throughout. Again, I can't guarantee that I'll have the answer for them, but I'll try my best. So a little bit about a refresher about these programs. So we talked about them last time. You'll have handouts with some of the information here, with some of this information as well, and you'll get the slides as well. But we're talking about the disability program. So Social Security Disability, or SSDI, is Title II of the Social Security Act. And in order to qualify for SSDI, you have to have a significant work history. That is, you've been paying into Social Security. And how much you get, it depends on how much you paid in. So those earnings that are used to count for your eligibility for SSDI, or for Social Security retirement for that matter, determine how much your monthly benefit is going to be. Now, this differs from retirement because you're disabled. You are unable to go back to work. And so you have to establish that you have a disability. And as we discussed last time, disability rules are based on these listings that either you meet a listing or you equal a listing, and that will keep you out of the workforce for at least a year. You can get retroactive benefits. You can get up to 12 months before you put in an application. So it is important that you put in an application as soon as possible, because you want to preserve your eligibility for programs. Someone on SSDI could also get food stamps, and will be eligible for Medicare after their 25th month of eligibility. Now, someone who is disabled, basically, it's not a permanent benefit. You're not going to get this forever. Social Security does run continuing disability reviews at various stages in an applicant's or in a recipient's receipt of benefits. It's never predictable when they happen, and they seem to be happening more often lately. So that is something that someone who gets onto SSDI, or SSI for that matter, needs to be aware of, is that they will be asked to review their eligibility at certain intervals. So let's take a look at look at someone who may be coming through one of our doors. We have Ruth. So what can we do to help Ruth? Ruth is 59 years old, recently experiencing homelessness, and prefers to stay near her old neighborhood for safety reasons. Now, she's worked sporadically at payday loan offices and H&R Block before becoming disabled due to a car accident, and she suffers severe bouts of depression, has fibromyalgia and debilitating osteoarthritis. So any work-related benefits aside, this is someone who seems like an ideal candidate for helping with SSDI. She has a work history. Even though she's worked sporadically, it's likely that she's worked enough. She's 59 years old, so she's not eligible for early retirement, but she could be eligible for Social Security disability. And we know she's got some mental health issues and she's got physical health issues that could prevent her from working in the economy. So it's certainly probably not able to go back to the work that she was doing before. Okay. So question, in light of COVID making it harder for people to access or services in person, are there parts of the SSI or SSDI enrollment processes that require paper or in-person appointments to sign documents or for other purposes? So in light of COVID, Social Security offices have been closed. This application process has been online for a while, but you can go online to help someone apply for SSI or SSDI. There's not much that, there's not a whole lot that can't be done online or by fax. So you could help your client, you can print out an application form, and if they need to sign it, they can sign it there. They can e-sign it by just typing their name in. But they can do a lot of this stuff online or by fax and over the phone too. So Social Security workers, if you call the local Social Security office, can go ahead and help with an application over the phone, help with requesting medical records, that kind of thing. Now, what kind of income can Ruth get here? And what do we have to do to get those benefits? So here, because she has some sort of work history, she could be eligible for SSDI. And what you can do is help someone set up a My Social Security account, or call with them to the office to get a sense of what their work history is and what they're eligible for. Everyone has been encouraged to sign up for My Social Security to get access to information about what their potential benefits are. It's good to just know every now and again, check in and to see what's going on, to see what's properly credited. Because if Social Security doesn't have information about your work history, you're not going to be credited for it. So that's another thing to look at, is if Ruth here knows when she works, has proof or could get proof, and Social Security doesn't have that, she can provide those records to Social Security and they'd be credited to her account. She might also be eligible for, depending on what her eligibility is here, additional income through SSI. Because if she doesn't make enough, or if her benefit is low enough, then she could supplement the income with SSI. So SSI, Title 16 of the Social Security Act, is a needs-based program. So this is money based on your income and assets, and the grant varies by state. So California tosses in an additional amount of money over the base grant. So it's $943 around that amount for on average for an SSI recipient in California. And it's based on need. So if someone has some income, that maximum grant is reduced based on that income, and also in-kind income. So donations that someone gets, a child gives money, those would reduce the grant. SSI beneficiaries in California can now receive food stamps. That's a recent change. Before, if you received SSI, you were prevented from applying for food stamps. And just like Social Security disability, if you are under the age of 65, you have to establish disability in order to qualify for SSI. And it's the same process as SSDI, and we will be talking about this process. Benefits will start the month after the application month, so it's not the same sort of retroactive rules that SSDI has. And there is the resource limit. So for those who know about Medi-Cal, this should sound familiar. Medi-Cal uses SSI rules in order to determine eligibility. And that's $2,000 countable assets. And someone who is eligible for SSI will automatically be eligible for Medi-Cal. And just like any other disability program under Social Security, there are continuing disability reviews that happen every now and again. All right, so questions. How long does it take for someone to get SSDI? Can you have SSDI and SSI? So it can take a while to get on. So there are folks that have been backlogged for 2 years. There are folks that can get on within a couple of months. It all depends on the quality of the evidence that's presented. So how fast medical records go in, how fast assessments happen, how fast Social Security reads the paperwork. That all depends. So with SSDI, again, you can get retroactive benefits. So they would just issue a large lump sum retro check for those months that they were eligible. A person could get SSDI and SSI. So for instance, if someone's SSDI benefit was $700, and the max SSI grant is $943, that person could get an additional $200-something in SSI benefits because they are below that threshold for needs-based the income threshold for SSI. Now, they also have to be asset eligible for SSI in order to get both. So another question is, where do I go to help Ruth apply for SSDI? What if she's homeless? So again, you can, these applications can be done online. So you can help them apply online. You can help them over the phone, or they can call Social Security, the local office, over the phone. Let's see. If they get retro benefits, do they run the risk of getting kicked off other benefits like Medi-Cal or SNAP? So a lot of these programs, and it varies by programs, have eligibility rules about lump sum benefits. So with retro benefits, they may or may not. It just depends on how each program characterizes the payment. Usually you can make the argument that no, they were entitled to these benefits in previous months. So this is just catching them up. That's, again, it just depends on which program. Question about the change in the benefit once they become housed versus homelessness. So again, that's part of the calculation. I know with things like SSI, it comes to things like, I want to say something about a kitchen, something about being able to prepare foods. There are different rules about how resources. So if someone has certain resources or doesn't have certain resources, that is something that comes up in their calculation of benefits. I'm not sure what policy reasons there are for that. I'm not the one making decisions or doing this stuff. If I was, things would look a little bit easier, or they might be more convoluted. Who knows? I'm an attorney. So, but yeah, it's just how they designed the program when it came to looking at housed versus unhoused populations and what needs unhoused populations may have versus housed populations. Alrighty. Okay, so let's look at Sam. Sam's 64, living on the street for over 20 years, as far as we can tell, and moves around a lot. Drinks alcohol to escape and has been known to use opioids occasionally. Had a job moving furniture when he was younger, but hasn't worked since at least 1999, and his family's all back east in New York City. So we know about SSDI. Would Sam qualify for SSDI? So here, we don't know that he doesn't have any work history for the last 20 years, which it'd be worth taking a look to see if he has any work history that he could get on. But Again, the benefit would be so low, it'd be negligible based on how long of a work history he has and how recent that work history is. He's been living on the streets for 20 plus years. He doesn't have support system because they're all back east. He drinks alcohol, has been known to use opioids. Would he qualify for SSI? Here the issue is that since he's 64, he'd need to be disabled, or he would need to go on to early retirement because he's over 62. Again, we don't know much about that he has much of a work history. So SSI would probably be the best bet until he turns 65. And until he turns 65, he's going to need to be looking at whether or not he's disabled. So it's not clear that he would qualify necessarily for SSI based on disability. You could look at his alcohol use or opioids, but you'd have to look at whether or not that has affected a system irreparably. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because that was a question that came up last time and in follow-up that people were interested in. But here it's not quite clear what we do for Sam. We could hook him up with other benefits like food stamps or SNAP benefits, with Medi-Cal benefits. But it's not quite clear that there are income programs that can help him right away. Once he turns 65, then yes, he would probably be eligible for SSI because of his age. And because he probably doesn't have income or assets that would preclude him from applying for SSI. All right. And then to round out the Social Security benefits for this population that we're working with, we're looking at retirement benefits. So you can start taking retirement benefits at the age of 62, which is early retirement. And again, this is one where you have to have the work history. You have to have paid into Social Security. Now, the benefit that you're going to get is going to depend on the wages that you've paid into the program. So you'd be looking at the time you've spent paying into the program and the amount you've paid in to determine how much you're actually going to get. Someone who qualifies for for retirement could also get food stamps, assuming that they're eligible for SNAP benefits. And again, you hear people talking about taking early retirement, and that is you can start taking Social Security earlier than your full retirement age, but you just have a lower monthly rate because that amount is supposed to stretch out longer. So if you're applying for SSI, you have to take early retirement. I don't know why, but I guess it's because if you are eligible for the benefit, you should take what benefits you're eligible for before other benefits. Again, SSI is sort of a safety net program, as hard as they make it to access the safety net. And then there are also other folks who could qualify for benefits based on your retirement benefit. So a widow, a spouse, a former spouse, a minor child, or an adult disabled child could also qualify under another person's Social Security record. Okay. So going back to Sam, what's he potentially eligible for outside of SSDI? So you'd want to screen him for all county programs as well. So he'd be probably eligible for general assistance, which would also come with health care. Food benefits, any other programs that might be available. It would be hard to apply for any of the Medicare related programs because if he's not on SSDI, he's probably not eligible for Medicare, and he won't be eligible for Medicare automatically until 65. So you'd want, for Sam, you just want to make sure that you look at all the income programs to get some form of income that would be that he could get while he's waiting to get eligible for the other programs, because that's how a lot of the other application programs go. So if they're collecting widow benefits, can that widow also apply for the self? Yes, but the widow would only be eligible for the biggest benefits. So if the widow would make more under their own retirement benefits, and that's assuming they're eligible to take retirement as it is, then they could only get one or the other. So they could only get widow benefits, or they could only get their own benefits, depending on what would get them a larger benefit. And again, depending on what they're eligible for. All right, so let's look at Ted. Ted's 66. He's worked all his life as a carpenter. He's renovated homes in the area, lost all his money when he was sued for a job he did 5 years ago. He has an estranged spouse. She's in Nevada somewhere, and he's been couch surfing with friends, but lately lives in a shelter. So what is Ted eligible for? So here, the key facts are his age. He's 66 years old, and he has a work history. He's worked all of his life. He lost all his money, so he doesn't have many assets. So this is someone that you might want to start screening for retirement. He's 66. He's likely around full retirement age, depending on when in the age of 66 he is. He has a work history. So he could go to Social Security or go to Social Security's website or call and start the process to get a Social Security benefit. He has an estranged spouse. So depending on how much, if the spouse's retirement age, and depending on the spouse's, how long they were married, and how much the spouse's benefit could be, he might get more that way. So the key thing is that he should be applying for Social Security benefits. He can also get Medicare. It's likely that if he has no money, that he can also get Medi-Cal, but Medi-Cal will insist that he applies for Medicare if he doesn't already have it. All right, questions? All right. Okay, so I've mentioned this in the context of both Social Security Disability and SSI, and this is where we get a lot of our cases at Legal Services, is the randomly timed continuing disability reviews. So these are regular, not super regular, but they happen whenever Social Security wants them to happen, and it's when Social Security will ask the disability recipient to fill out the paperwork again, to get more records to see if that person is still disabled. And if someone is terminated based on the fact that they're no longer disabled, they normally have 60 days to appeal a negative determination. So you do have that 2-month window to challenge the termination, but you have 10 days to appeal in order to keep getting paid. So it's always important for someone that if they wanted to challenge the decision, that they appeal as soon as possible in order to preserve their benefits. They can file a late request for good cause. Let's say someone's in a hospital and misses the 60-day deadline, they can use that as good cause. And here it's Social Security that has to prove that the person is no longer disabled. And if Social Security meets that burden, then it's going to be based on the current condition. All right, saw question. Okay, so confusion about who's eligible for retirement. So retirement is, your eligibility is based on paying into the system. So it's generally about 10 years worth of paying into the system in order to be eligible for Social Security retirement. So you can start taking retirement at the age of 62. It's going to be a lower benefit, but it's a benefit that's supposed to stretch on longer, because the assumption is that the earlier you take it, let's say if your normal life expectancy is so long, if you'd taken it full benefit at full retirement age, you'd have less time to actually get the benefits of your retirement. So if you take it early, they need to stretch it out longer, so they reduce your benefit. You can also get the access to someone else's retirement based on relationship. So if you are a spouse and you didn't have the work history, you can use your spouse's work history. If you are divorced and you were married to that person for a certain amount of time, you could get some of that person's benefits, as long as you didn't remarry. And then survivors could also get access to that. So if a minor child, disabled adult child who relied on that person for their livelihood, they could also be eligible for retirement. But basically, think about retirement as meeting a minimum age and having worked a minimum amount of time in a job that paid into Social Security. So that's the other, when I talk about paying into Social Security, you're looking at, if you look at your pay stub and see that they've taken out for Social Security, that's going to be it. You're looking specifically for 40 quarters, which is equivalent to 10 years of payments, although it's not necessarily, it's basically you could work a couple of months each year and get the full 4 quarters. But that's how someone is going to be eligible. And then as far as retirement, normal retirement, then your full retirement benefit is determined by when you were born. So statutes have changed the retirement age. So like for me, I'm expecting my retirement age to be never, because they will find a way to change that freaking age to make it impossible for me to retire. But for some of you all, maybe that's not going to be the same. But basically right now it's 67 for a lot of folks, 66 for a number of other folks, depending on when you were born. And then early retirement, you can start taking retirement benefits at the age of 62, especially now that we've seen a lot of folks who've lost their jobs due to COVID, basically forced to take early retirement because, unemployment benefits only last so long. All right. Feel free to continue asking questions. Again, I'm not sure you'll be satisfied with my answers, but I'll do the best that I can, and then take any questions back to get you the actual right answers. All right. So what can you do in order to help someone who's gotten these negative decisions or potentially negative decisions? So it depends on where they are in the process. So if you're helping someone apply for the first time for any disability benefits, you're talking about the initial claims. So at the initial claim, there's the submission of the initial application. There is a reconsideration where they will look at the application again to see if they messed up. Then there's an administrative law judge hearing, appeals council, and federal court. So obviously with federal court, you need to be an attorney to file, or you need to get an attorney to file. But you don't necessarily have to be an attorney to do some of the other things. There are forms that can be filled out that say that the applicant would like this person to help me with my case. At legal services, we generally get involved at the administrative law judge hearing, and that's when we would want people to send them over. But we will talk to people about reconsideration. We generally don't help with that paperwork, because initial application and reconsideration, those are just paper level discussions. Now, when you talk about those continuing disability reviews where people are terminated because they're found to be no longer disabled, that's probably when you'll want to consult with someone else almost immediately. So you're going to look at the SSA decision, the decision that said you are no longer disabled or you've improved. And then you can request, depending on what the situation is. So they may say that you owe them money. So you can request a formal conference to discuss overpayments, or you can go to a disability hearing officer to look at the continuing disability review. Those are sort of the reconsideration phases for these. And then you can then request a hearing and then go through the formal process to challenge. At Legal Services, we get involved a lot earlier. We get involved because there are more ways to try to challenge or challenge these overpayments or disability determinations to try to preserve benefits a lot that are a lot easier and more straightforward than the initial claim. As a best practice, if people do not know where to start, should they call SSA to figure out what someone is eligible for and when the client becomes known to them? SSA has a lot of the information about eligibility, so it would be a good practice, especially if you have the client with you, to just call the local Social Security office and ask about what information that the potential beneficiary is already in the system. So what's their work history? Is there any work history? Other things that would show, okay, what this person, if they were to apply now for, say, disability, would they be eligible for SSDI or would they just be eligible for SSI? The other thing that could be done is to just help someone with a My Social Security account. That may be difficult if they don't really have access to the internet or don't trust the internet, which is another thing that we've been coming up against, which is fine. But that's also a way to get access to that information without having to wait an hour or so to talk to a Social Security rep. So those are the two places to start when you're trying to figure out if someone's eligible for a benefit or what their records say, because it's all going to be based on what Social Security records say. And if Social Security doesn't have that information, then Social Security doesn't have that information. And then you might be able to help them track down the information that they need. Okay. So how is disability done? It's through Disability Determination Services. They do these disability evaluations. They also do the Medi-Cal disability evaluations when that was a thing. And here is where these are the folks that are gathering the evidence. So if you can help a person get access to their medical records, or doctor's letters or something like that, you can help them submit the information to Disability Determination Services. That is one way one thing that'll help expedite the process is getting those records earlier. Social Security does access records or does ask for records. Sometimes that just takes a while. You can also ask the Determination Services for a comparison if there's a continuing a disability review and they don't have it in the file. Okay. Are there any benefits for non-US citizens? So green card holders or legal permanent residents and very limited other immigration statuses would have access to some benefits, assuming one, if they're a green card holder, they've been in the country for at least 5 years. So there is a 5-year bar for a lot of these benefits because they're federal benefits. They're not strictly state benefits. And that's usually the only major status that is allowed access to these benefits. So folks that are undocumented do not have access to these benefits. Even folks like refugees and asylees, I'm not quite sure that they are eligible, although they can adjust their status at a certain point at a certain point. All right. So with disability hearings, a disability hearing officer, again, this is when you're challenging someone's determination that they're no longer disabled, tend to be informal. You can present evidence, you can present testimony, but it's really just, depending on the judge, depending on the hearing officer, an informal chat. But if you are representing someone, you need to put in this 1696 form, this appointment of representative form, well before the hearing, because you're not going to be able to submit this form at the hearing. for the judge to recognize you as your client's person. All right, questions. Aren't hearings done over the phone, especially during COVID? Yes. So most of these hearings are phone hearings, and this was all before COVID. But yeah, but really, again, this is a more informal, sort of like if you've ever had to take a public benefits hearing to Medi-Cal or something like that, it can feel a bit more informal. Only these aren't recorded. So Medi-Cal hearings, due process hearings there, for SNAP, those get recorded. These don't, which can be a problem later on for the record, but as far as making sure you're prepared, that's sort of the level of formality you can expect from a disability hearing officer hearing. Now, how does someone get determined to be disabled? So there's a 5-step process. I mentioned this briefly last time, but it's going to be looking at a step-by-step. Are you working or earning less than substantial gainful activity? So they're going to look at whether or not you have any income coming in from work. And if it's over a certain amount, which is, I mean, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I think it's in the slide later, but it's going to be over $1,000, probably over $1,200. But if you make over that amount in a month, then you're considered to have substantial gainful activity, which means you're working, you're in the economy. Why you probably aren't disabled. So if you aren't making that threshold amount, they'll take a look at whether your condition is severe. Is it going to prevent you from working or keep you out of the workforce for at least a year, or result in your death? Now, if it's a severe condition, they'll take a look at whether you meet or equal a listing. If you go to Social Security's website, you can find listings, which lists sort of all these different conditions that qualify as disabling conditions and what medical evidence would need to be presented for each one. So if you meet one of these listings, then you're disabled. They skip steps 3 and 4, you're disabled. You can also meet a listing, equal a listing. So maybe there's not something that lines up exactly with one of these, but it looks like one or two of these. And so if you present the evidence that equals a listing, then you've met step 3 and you don't have to go on to step 4 and 5. If you can't do step 3, you'll go into step 4 and 5. And this is where they're going to look at your ability to work. So first, they're going to see, can you go back to what you did before you were disabled? If not, can you do any work in the economy, any work? So they're going to look at something called the grids, which is they're going to look at a different type of work requirements to see if you fit into any potential job in the national economy. It doesn't matter if that job doesn't exist here, which is a problem, but they will look at vocational experts and determine whether or not you could do other work. Okay. So SGA is substantial gainful activity. That is a minimum threshold amount that is considered to be actually working. So folks that make more than that SGA, the substantial gainful activity, will be considered working and thus not in need of disability, because if you were disabled, you wouldn't be able to work. Now, unemployment is unearned income, so it's not earned income. So that would come in mostly at the SSI stage. So certain benefits are counted, certain aren't, but it all depends. So if someone gets SSI or SSDI and then picks up a part-time job later, SSI is needs-based. So your income from work is going to change your SSI amount report directly. So a dollar for dollar reduction. Actually, no, because there are some earned income deductions So it's not necessarily going to be dollar for dollar, but they will reduce your benefit based on the fact that you have income coming in. With SSDI, they're going to look and see if you're making substantial gainful activity. So if you make more than that threshold, it's going to start a clock running. And there's going to be a trial work period, all these different things that say, do you actually need this disability benefit because you're working? And so it'll be sort of it'll be a timeline that gets set based on the number of months that you've surpassed this substantial gainful activity. Unemployment, it depends on which program and what rules are being used. In some places it's not counted, in other places it is. So that's sort of the caveat of knowing that, you know, sometimes this extra money coming in could affect all these other benefits that you're getting. Okay. So at the disability reviews, they're going to take a look at something similar, but they're going to look mostly at medical improvement. Has there been a medical improvement? And if there is it related to the ability to work? So you could get better, your disability could improve, but it doesn't have to affect your ability to work. And then they'll also look at exceptions to this improvement. And then that's going to be that whole medical improvement portion of it. And then they'll go back and look at whether or not you meet a listing. So it's a similar thing, but in this case, they're looking at medical improvement. Okay. So how do you prepare the disability case? So the key is that your disability claim has to be supported by medical evidence. So if you can help your client gather this medical evidence, which is treatment notes, psychological testing, any sort of scans and x-rays, any doctor's letters or questionnaires. Social Security has their own questionnaire. Social Security will send the questionnaires. It is better if you can get the doctor to write a letter to talk about the disabilities. If you can provide them the listing that might be relevant and have them talk about that, that's even better. Any school records that might be useful, any witness statements. There's not a lot of weight put behind witness statements, but witness statements are useful in especially things like talking about, can this person actually work? There are electronic records that can be sent, discs can be sent, and then as an advocate, you're supposed to be able to access medical records for free when it's about a public benefits appeal. So that is something that you could help an applicant with as far as gathering that medical evidence and expediting getting it to the reviewer. So the key is then, how do you evaluate that? How does that medical evidence get evaluated? So it used to be that a treating physician was given greater and controlling weights before the Social Security's examiner would get weights. There's no more treating physician rule, but I think you still argue that this is the doctor that has more responsibility for this patient than this Social Security person who is paid to see them once. Right now, it's going to be the evaluation is based on the supportability of the opinion. So evaluating opinions have to consider the underlying medical records. How consistent is this opinion with those medical records? Do those records support that opinion? And this evaluation is supposed to consider that claimant has a treating physician, a longstanding relationship with the treating source. Now that can be a problem if the person hasn't seen a doctor in years, but you do what you can with the person who's actually seeing that patient. And it doesn't have to be a doctor. I think because of our healthcare system, we have a lot of nurse practitioners that are primary care providers, and that is acceptable. But a licensed clinical social worker, that is not an acceptable source, although you could still submit it as evidence. It's just not going to get the weight it deserves from someone who's actually treating the patient. And then lay testimony, other witness as evidence, is not going to be given the same weights, but it's an error for a judge not to consider the testimony in coming up with their decision. All right. So I'm very cognizant of our time. So I want to make sure that we're going through this disability stuff and advocacy on disability, as well as addressing any questions that come in. Okay. So let's go back. So with terminations, Social Security can terminate a benefit if the person's no longer disabled or they don't comply with income or asset rules for Social Security. So just like any other program, there are threshold rules, disability being one of them, but income and asset for SSI being another. So if someone's being terminated for income or asset rules, there might be an exception. So I've given you citations for where you can find the exceptions for income or assets. For instance, if someone gets a retroactive benefit for something, there might be an exclusion that doesn't allow that to be counted as income. So you'd want to take a look at these citations. You can Google them to find them specifically, but these are the helpful ones to help target someone who's being terminated based on an asset or an income source that shouldn't have been used in the determination. All right. So another issue that comes up is Social Security will recalculate benefits and say, oh, we think we paid you too much. So what can you do to help someone who faces that situation where Social Security wants them to pay the money back and they don't have the money for it, which oftentimes is the case for most of our clients. So you can choose one of two different ways. You can go for the reconsideration, which is when the client wasn't overpaid or the amounts that they're saying they were overpaid is wrong. Or if Social Security's action is wrong, you have to file a request timely to prevent Social Security from taking action to collect that overpayment. And then if they deny this, you can go for a waiver. Now, the waiver is acknowledging that the client was overpaid, but it wasn't the client's fault that they were overpaid. So there are all sorts of reasons for the waiver and for consideration of a waiver, including the recipient's education, any language barriers, disability. So for instance, any sort of educational disabilities, learning disabilities, anything that would prevent them from really sort of trying to correct this themselves. Okay. All right. So any other questions in this section? I know I've stopped for questions throughout, so that's probably disorienting. All righty. Seeing none for now, we'll move on to the next poll question. All right. So the income of most of my clients falls between which amounts? 0, under 600, under 1100, under 1500, over 1500 a month, or other. And this is just to get a better sense of who you all are serving or trying to reach. All righty. So a few more seconds and I will end this poll. All right. So it looks like for the most part, most people are barely over 100% of the federal poverty level. So under $1,100 per month. And that's for the folks that did pay attention and aren't asleep because of me. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the forms that are used in Social Security work. So the big one is the second one, the authorized representative form, 1696. This is the form that needs to be on file at Social Security in order to communicate with Social Security on behalf of a client, to submit an appeal or any of these reconsideration forms. This is the main form that is helpful in saying I am the one that this client wants to assist with this. This is the form that we collect at Legal Services when we work on appeals. There's also a consent for release of information. This grants some of that power, but it's not the same. So you're not making decisions, but it allows Social Security to communicate with you about certain things. So this might be the form that you collect from your client initially if you're just trying to help them get information. Now, if you're going to help them fill out paperwork, then the 1696 is the form that you're going to need. But and that can also be filled out with the online application. So online, they can designate authorized representative. Now, an authorized representative is not the same as a payee, a representative payee. That is different. You're not getting their check. You're not doing that stuff for them. You're basically helping them with their legal rights as far as getting information, communicating with Social Security, filing requests for appeals, that kind of thing. All right. So how do you help prepare for hearing? So if you are helping someone take a hearing, and this is sort of what we do at Legal Services as well, is that we work on developing the record, getting evidence, submitting the evidence as it's received. We have the duty to do that. And if we've also helped prepare a form for a doctor, we have to let Social Security know that we've prepared that form for them, or that someone else prepared the form. All this evidence has to be submitted before the hearing. So any sort of letter or statement, all the evidence has to be submitted 5 days before the hearing. And that allows you to frame the evidence. That allows you to sort of argue how the judge should evaluate, how the judge should give more weight to this person than that person. And that just sort of is what you would be arguing. That's how we would prepare the case at Legal Services, and that's how you should think about it if you're looking at helping a client advocate for disability benefits, is to get all that evidence and say, this is the strongest evidence, this is what you should give more weight to, and here's why. So I mentioned SGA, substantial gainful activity, and this is what people will look at. That's step one of all those processes of determining whether or not you're disabled. So if you're looking at the disability benefits, this amount triggers. So for 2020, it's $1,260 is the SGA for someone who's not blind. And this triggers continuing disability review, it triggers trial work periods, and it could trigger termination of benefits if you've been making that amount for a certain amount of time. Now, if someone's on Social Security retirement, there's no income limit. And some people take retirement early and then go back to work. People have their reasons, and so there's no SGA doesn't get involved in there. There are other rules that apply when it comes to people who take early retirement and work again, but that is a bridge to cross when that person happens to cross it. Now, one of the questions that came up, which was a really good question, was what about substance abuse related disabilities? And so in '96, as part of general welfare reform, Congress limited disability benefits for drug addiction and alcoholism. So there had been a substance abuse listing. So I talked about those listings to meet or equal a listing. And there was one until 2018 for substance abuse. The way someone is determined for disability when they have a substance abuse related disability is they'll look at whether that substance abuse contributed to disability. So is substance abuse a contributing factor material to determination of your disability, unless you're over 65 or blind? So what's material? How is it material? So they're going to look at whether you would still be disabled if you stopped using the substance. So which current limitations would remain if you stopped using the substance, and are those remaining limitations disabling? So for instance, if someone has alcohol dependent liver disorder or something like that, and that if they stop drinking alcohol, they would no longer have that disorder, then the alcoholism is a contributing factor that's material to the disability. So, but that you aren't going to be disabled if you stop drinking. That's what they're going to argue. Now, if you have irreparable liver damage, so cirrhosis and other sort of liver things based on alcoholism, and it wouldn't matter if you stopped drinking because the liver disease would still be there, then the alcoholism is not material to the determination of disability, and they would look at that cirrhosis, that liver damage, to see whether or not that's disabling. We're also looking at opioids. A lot of people have take opioids for different reasons, and I think of the pain management folks, the folks who were prescribed these opioids like Skittles back when people didn't know what was happening. So how would that opioid addiction affect someone who has a disability for the underlying pain condition, for instance? So in that situation, I'd argue that even if you controlled the opioid addiction, got that person off opioids, they'd still have the underlying pain issue, like fibromyalgia or anything that the underlying reason for the person to have taken opioids. And if that is still a disability, then that person should still be disabled or considered disabled. And that's how I would argue it. So that's the key, is looking at, if there's that behavioral, that substance-related disorder that is disabling, but it causes some other disabling condition, you'll want to look at the effect of stopping the substance use on that other disabling condition in order to determine whether or not that person is disabled for Social Security purposes. Okay, so that's a lot of disability. Say they get onto disability, say they get Medicare. Medicare, like we discussed previously, it's expensive. Maybe not initially, but dollars and cents add up. And for someone who is low income on SSI or SSDI or on none of those programs, it's not always easy to afford to pay for all this stuff. There's a monthly premium, there's deductibles, there are copays. So there are these Medicare savings programs. They're designed to help low-income beneficiaries with Medicare cost sharing. And according to some of the statistics that Medicare collects, somewhere around 60 to 80% of Medicare beneficiaries need assistance with their Medicare costs. And I put up this slide to give you an idea of how much these costs can be. So if someone has a hospital stay, they're going to have a deductible, they're going to have co-pays if they stay longer, and if they're sent to a nursing home afterwards, there's a co-insurance for that. Part B has an annual premium or a monthly premium. There's a deductible, there's co-pays for that stuff. That's a lot of money for a program that is supposed to guarantee some sort of coverage. So these Medicare savings programs are available. They're administered by Department of Healthcare Services, the state Medicaid program, as a special Medicaid eligibility category. And so in order to be eligible for these programs, you've got, you have to be enrolled in parts A and B, and you have to meet certain income tests based on the program. So each one of these programs have a corresponding federal poverty level threshold, and will generally follow the Medi-Cal rules for countable income. There are resource limits as well. So for an individual, they can have no more than $7,860 in countable assets. And that amount is increased for a married couple. There is legislation that is pending that would eliminate the resource limits for Medicare savings programs. That is currently in the legislature. I'm not counting on it passing, but who knows? All right. Okay. So there are 4 different Medicare savings programs. You've got the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary Program, the Specified Low Income Beneficiary Program, the Qualified Individual, and the qualified disabled and working individual programs. So the thresholds for each program are set. For Quimby, it's 100% of the federal poverty level. SLMB, it's 120. QI, it's 135, and the QUIDWI program is 200% and above. And so this table is a shortcut as far as what are the individual thresholds. In your handouts, I've also included another two handouts on Medicare savings programs to help you with understanding what each program does and what the thresholds are for each program. So going through each one individually, the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary Program, or QIMBY, covers the Part A premium for someone who doesn't qualify for free Part A, the Part B premium, and the copays and deductibles for Parts A and B, as well as if cost sharing if they sign up for a Medicare Advantage program. Now, someone who qualifies for the QMB program also has stronger balance billing protections, which means that if you go to a provider that has accepted them as a Medicare beneficiary, they can't bill them for the remainder of the bill, even if they normally would qualify to even if the provider would normally bill the beneficiary. So someone who signs up for QMB, there are no retroactive benefits. So it is all going to be effective the first month after their eligibility is determined. So for SLMB and QI, these are both programs that cover the Part B premium and the Part B premium only. So you can, in this program, get retroactive benefits for up to 3 months before the month of application, just like a Medi-Cal application. The distinction is that the QI program, the one with the higher income threshold, is limited. Their funds are limited. It's available on first come, first served basis, and the state at any time can cut off enrollment into the QI program. Then finally, the QDWI or QUIDWI program covers the Part A premium for folks who lose their free Medicare because they started making too much money. So in order to be eligible for this program, they have to receive Medicare due to disability. They can't be eligible for free Part A because they lost their SSDI benefits. They can't otherwise be eligible for Medi-Cal, and there are income and resource requirements for this program. The resource requirements are different than the other Medicare savings programs. So how does someone apply for a Medicare savings program? So someone who already has Part A or B and B, have both of them already, can apply for this program at any time. They just go through the local Medi-Cal office. So for Sacramento, that's the Department of Human Assistance. They're just being asked to be screened for a Medicare savings program. They do not have to apply for Medi-Cal, although they could if they wanted to. Now, if someone isn't enrolled in Part A, they didn't apply when they were first eligible, they have to apply for Part A during the 3-month general enrollment period at the beginning of the year at Social Security. Again, they can do this over the phone or online to apply for Part A. That Part A is going to be effective July 1st. Now, they can apply for Part A on a conditional basis if they only want Part A if they're eligible for QMB. So, you know, Part A has a premium for those who don't get it for free, and that is a factor that comes in for folks who just, you know, I don't want to pay $400-something a month. So they can apply for Part A only on the condition that they are eligible for QMB. And so once they do put in that application, they can apply for the Medicare Savings Program at the Department of Human Assistance. Okay. So the question was, there's a question about applying for Medicare savings programs remotely. And since the Medicare savings program is a Medi-Cal eligibility category, you can apply for it through DHA's. DHA is what? My Benefits Cal Win? Ugh, I hate confusing the two systems. But you can go online and apply for a Medicare savings program to be screened for that program. They can also call the call center to ask to be screened for that program or ask to do the application. And this is, because a lot of these offices aren't open due to COVID. So a related program and a related cost, and one that is very important to a lot of Medicare beneficiaries, is prescription drugs. And prescription drugs cost money because we haven't figured out a system in the United States to provide prescription drugs at a low cost. So in the time until that happens, there's the low income subsidy or extra help to assist people with some of the costs related to that prescription drug coverage, mainly the premiums, deductibles, and copays. So to be eligible for the low income subsidy, you have to be enrolled in a Part D plan. And on average, someone who's eligible for LIS will save $4,000 to $5,000 a year. That's not chump change. It's not a huge amount when we're talking about healthcare, but it is for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of money for something that they take regularly, a good amount of savings. So how does someone qualify for a low income subsidy? There are two ways. They can automatically get it or they can apply for it. So folks who will automatically get it, which means they don't have to apply for it, are those who are dual eligible. So if they get full scope Medi-Cal with no share of costs, they will automatically qualify for extra help. Same if they qualified for those Medicare savings programs that we talked about, the QMB, the SlimB, and the QI. If they qualify for those programs, they will qualify for extra help. And then someone who has a share of cost for their Medi-Cal but ends up meeting their share of cost during at least 1 month, those beneficiaries will also automatically get extra help for a certain amount of time. Now, if you don't automatically qualify, you can apply, and that's for folks who have an income up to 150% of the federal poverty level. And those folks can apply through Social Security. So I've included the website as the place where you can go to apply for the extra help program. And the level of benefits that someone gets through extra help, having applied for it, will depend on their income and assets. So what's the basic criteria? So this is a chart to help you sort of determine where a potential beneficiary would lie. But in order to get the full subsidy, we're looking at 135% of the federal poverty level. So they could have income and assets up to a certain amount to qualify for a full subsidy, and then up to 150% for a partial subsidy. So they'd get some benefit some extra help benefit, but not get the full benefit. So what is full versus partial? So someone who gets the full benefits will qualify for certain benchmark plans where you don't have to pay a premium, deductible, or a coverage gap while you're in that plan. So the copays for these prescriptions depend on what kind of beneficiary they are, but it's going to be low, anywhere from $1.35 to $8, depending on the type of medication. And then there's no copay or coinsurance when someone reaches catastrophic coverage in their Part D plan. Someone who's on a partial subsidy will pay a monthly premium on a sliding scale basis. They have an annual deductible, a low annual deductible, lower coinsurance, and then during catastrophic coverage, they'll pay low copays. All right, so let's go back to questions in that section. All right. So applying. So there's a question about layering. Can someone have these benefits, all of these benefits? And the answer is yes. So a lot of these are income-based. So if someone is below a certain threshold, so if you get $1,200 of SDI, you are probably eligible for free Medi-Cal, depending on your income or assets. So I encourage folks to apply for whatever they can get. But if someone gets a Medicare savings program, they are automatically going to be eligible for extra help. it's likely that they probably have some sort of Medi-Cal eligibility. And if they're eligible for SSI, they're automatically going to get Medi-Cal, but they would probably have to apply for a Medicare savings program because SSI-linked Medi-Cal cases are not hosted by the county. It's hosted by Social Security. So they'd have to at least contact the Department of Human Assistance to get some of these things. There are a lot of things, again, because we're not talking about people who are making a lot of money. So even if they're getting SSI, or especially if they're getting SSI, they're low income, low asset. They already have proven that. So there are a lot of benefits that they are qualified for, and especially with some of the changes to SNAP eligibility so that you can be on SSI and get some food stamps, there are benefits that they should go to Department of Human Assistance and apply on. They can do that online. And they can do a lot of these processes online now. All right. And then just really quickly through Medi-Cal, because we talked about this, and I know some of you actually deal with this a lot. So Medi-Cal, basically, these are basic health insurance for California residents, where the income is based on whichever program they're looking at, resource limits based on whichever program they're looking at. Since I'm talking about seniors and people with disabilities, especially those with Medicare, there is an asset limit, usually about $2,000 for an individual, $3,000 for a married couple. And the application process is through the county. So you can go, again, you can apply online. I want to say through the DHA website. And it's the same sort of application process for CalWorks and for CalFresh. You can apply for all those benefits, but they have 45 days to process an application, and it's effective the month they apply. So let's say I applied July 31st and my application I wasn't found eligible until September. Well, my effective date is July 1st because I applied July 31st. And I could apply for 3 months retroactive coverage if I was eligible for those previous months. So there are different, for our population, so folks with disabilities and folks who are older, there are different Medi-Cal programs outside of the MAGI programs and that they may be eligible for that I want to focus on, because there are ways to help people get onto Medi-Cal with no share of costs that maximize all these benefits. So SSI linked to Medi-Cal, it's straightforward. Someone who gets SSI will automatically qualify for Medi-Cal. They do not have to apply for it. But the county doesn't have an eligibility case for that beneficiary. So if you're helping them with a Medicare savings program, you're going to have to go to Medi-Cal, to the county, and help them apply for that through the county's portals. There are some low-income beneficiaries who will receive SSI and SSDI or retirement because they're very low income. So they may have eligibility for both Medicare and Medi-Cal due to those income-related benefits. For most of our beneficiaries, we're talking about the federal poverty level, the Aged, Blind, and Disabled program. This is someone who's eligible for this program is over the age of 65 or blind or disabled, hence aged, blind, or disabled. There is an asset limit to this. So this is the same asset limit that SSI uses because Medi-Cal uses SSI rules for this program. And the income limit is almost $1,300 a month for an individual. Now, countable income has a number of different deductions that are possible: health insurance premiums, work-related income, certain other deductions. And at a certain point, the income limit is going to change to 138% of the federal poverty level. It was supposed to happen August 1st, but because of the budget, the proposed budget, the May revised, the governor's proposed budget had eliminated that program, and the compromise had restored that program. DHCS is not proceeding with the expansion just yet. But that's sort of the income, those are the income programs right now, or income limits right now. So an example of this, if we're looking at Maria, she's 68, she gets $1,300 a month from Social Security retirement. She pays $86 for a Kaiser Senior Advantage premium. Now, the rules for countable income include an automatic deduction of $20 and any deduction for healthcare premiums. So for Maria, her countable income is $1,194. Recall that the threshold for for free Medi-Cal is $1,200, $1,294. So she's going to be eligible for the age blind and disabled federal poverty level. So she gets free Medi-Cal, which means Medi-Cal pays her Part B premium. Sounds like a good deal. Now, there is the medically needy program. It's also called the share of cost program. And if someone's income is too high, is over that $1,294, they're going to have a share of cost, assuming that they're asset eligible. So this is what a beneficiary has to pay or agree to pay each month for healthcare services before Medi-Cal will pay for services. Think of it as a deductible. You have to incur a certain amount of costs before Medicare kicks in, or Medi-Cal kicks in. It's not a monthly debt that people pay. It's not a bill that you pay to Medi-Cal. Basically, they're going to look at your countable income and then subtract the maintenance need level. Now, for an individual, that's $600. $600 is the amount that the state of California determined back in the 80s was enough for a person to live in the state of California for a month. So it's a joke, but it's a joke that hasn't been updated. So the punchline remains the same, is that it keeps people out. So how does that get calculated? So let's look at Charles. He gets $1,500 a month for SSDI. He pays the Part B premium and he pays a Part D premium. So we go through the same math. We deduct the automatic deduction, and we also deduct those premiums that he pays. So the Part B premium, the the Part D premium, those get deducted from his countable income to determine a countable income of $1,295.40. That is just a little over $1 over the threshold. So unfortunately, he has a share of costs of $695. So how can we help this person avoid the share of costs? Well, you can help him reduce his countable income, find additional deductions, or find a different Medi-Cal program that he might be eligible for. And I will flag this SSDI and I'll flag the threshold because he's, again, only $1 over that threshold for free Medi-Cal. So what's another program that he might be eligible for? The Working Disabled program. I've included a flyer about this program as well. This is for folks who are working and disabled. So they're disabled according to Social Security rules. This program allows them to have more countable income, and it will exempt and deduct certain income from their countable numbers. So this has the same asset limits. So again, we're looking at a higher income threshold, the same asset limits, but exemptions for retirement accounts, a flexible work requirement. So there's no definition about work. It's not a 9 to 5. There's no minimum thresholds. When I've helped folks, some folks are recycling cans. And what that ends up doing is eliminating the share of costs and instituting a monthly premium in its place for free Medi-Cal, for no share of cost Medi-Cal. So how does that work? So let's look at Michael. He gets $900 of Social Security disability benefits, $1,500 a month from work. He spends $100 a month on impairment-related work expenses. So when we look at his countable income for working disabled, we ignore his SSDI benefits. So that $900 doesn't count. So starting with that $1,500, we take all the deductions, which is a $20 automatic deduction, $65 for income, for earned income, that impairment-related work expenses, and then divide that in half because that's the earned income deduction. His countable income is $657.50, which results in a $25 a month working disabled premium. Now, if we looked at what his share of cost would have been, his share of cost would have been $957. So this is much more favorable for someone who is disabled and has some sort of work to get the full benefits of Medi-Cal. And then someone who gets onto full scope Medi-Cal then gets as a benefit the extra help program and some of the benefits of some of the Medicare savings programs as well. The Part B premium being the big one. All right, so I've talked a lot, and I apologize. That's sort of the nature of the beast. Any other questions? Anything people want to ask? All right. Well, okay. So moving on. So when can you send people over if you have folks that require more assistance than you're able to give? So you can go ahead and refer to legal services for SSDI and SSI appeals and any other public benefits appeals that you're not able, you don't have the capacity to take. So we generally get involved at the administrative law judge stage for all sort of determinations. And then we can do for continuing a determination some of the formal conference and evaluation. We will work with folks who have questions at the redeterminations. We just don't do the paper appeals that way. But we will do some consultation when people have questions about what they need to do. For Medi-Cal, we help with all sorts of denials, and whether it's eligibility or service denials. So we've talked about eligibility. We have not talked about services, and that is fine. And then you can call our main line. It's usually first come, first service. We tend to get swamped with housing, but for public benefits, we're almost always looking for those cases. And then for HICAP, you can call us about any Medicare related issue, whether it's about enrollment, benefits counseling, service appeals and denials, and then assistance with the applications for Medicare savings programs and the low income subsidy. We will help with applications as well. Yeah, just feel free to send people over with questions, and feel free to contact us with questions. All right, so let's see, handing it over.
Thank you so much, John. I know that we are all grateful for this extremely technical information today. I know that many people probably have questions they can't even formulate right now. So we will leave everyone to kind of let this sink in. It is recorded for the purposes of playback. If you missed a certain section or you're wondering, you know, how do I figure this out? What did he say? Which acronym was that? I highly recommend going back to that particular section. Another reason we record these is for just institutional knowledge and wisdom. So you might have new staff that come on board that need this information. So I highly recommend bookmarking the link to this that's going to go out. But I think you'll also see in the chat we have an evaluation. We ask that you fill that out if you can. It does help to inform our trainings. In addition, I would just like to say thank you again for participating in this. I know it was intense. And for those of you who do not recognize my voice, this is Heather Bates with Transform Health. I'm closing us out because we ran into some internet issues with our colleague. So I just want to take this time again to say thank you, John. You will get a link, everyone, to the materials, the slides, the YouTube recording, as well as our evaluation. So I really look forward to doing this again with you all and hearing your questions in the near future. Take care, everyone.